it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Forest Friends, Forest Fawns, and Big Hugs Woodland. So I have stamped the images I'll be using on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. So I'm starting with my foxes, and my go-to combo for quite some time for foxes has been YR12, YR14, and YR18. Although lately I have been wishing for a slightly darker shade in the mix to add just a bit more contrast, not all the time, but some of the time. And so today I decided to try out E19 with this combo, and I laid in my shadows first with that. And I do really like how this color worked with the others. So now I'm coming in with the YR18 and I'm beginning to blend that out. Those two colors work really well together, even though they're not from the same color family. The numbers coincide. So the way Copics work, the letter stands for the color family, and then the next number is the saturation level from 0 to 9 or 00 to 9, and then the second number is the brightness from 00 to 9. So the E19 is actually an E19 and the YR18 is YR18. So 9 and 8, they go together as I'm working darkest to lightest. So I blended out with the YR18, and then now I'm working on that YR14, pulling that color out a bit, making sure to really go over the previous shade and pull that into the next one so that I get a nice smooth blend, although I will be doing a second layer. That second layer not only increases the saturation because you're going over it a second time, but it also just intensifies the colors, makes them so much more brighter, and smooths out your blends quite a bit more as well. So now I'm going in with the second layer. I decided to leave that in the video today. A lot of you guys say that you prefer me to leave it in the video, but I like to have a balance of longer and shorter videos so that there's something for everybody on my channel. I know that the more intense coloring videos aren't for everyone. They are absolutely up my alley. It's where I just feel the most at home and the most kind of at peace. I find coloring so very therapeutic, and I really love the coloring process. It is my absolute favorite part of card making. So I am doing that second layer, just going exactly over where I had those colors laid down the first time. The only difference, and I've said this many times, but the only difference is sometimes I don't take the lightest shade completely over, so you end up with one layer of the lightest shade for a bit extra highlight. Today I did cover it over completely. I also went outside the lines a little bit on his cheek there in the white part, so I just used my colorless blender to push that color back over the line. And now I'm moving on to my second fox. So for him, I'm coloring him exactly the same, but I am switching up my light source because I like my critters to have their highlight on their faces so that you can see all of their expressiveness. They're so beautifully drawn and illustrated, and I really want you to be able to see those adorable features, which is what drew us in the first place. So I like to have the highlight on the face and the shadows on the back of the body. So for the first fox, he was facing mostly forward. His head is completely forward. His body is a little bit tipped toward the left, but this little guy is facing completely toward the left. So his shadows are going to go on the right hand side of his body. And I'm going to also add that where his tail is connected to his body, the backs of his ears, because they would be cast in more shadow, and the backs of his legs. That one leg, the back leg that's on the far side of the body, that would really not get any highlight there to our view. So I colored that in completely with just the darkest two shades. but now I'm coming in with my second to last, the YR14, and beginning to blend that out. And I was so into the zone with this coloring and listening to an audiobook that I didn't realize that my camera had stopped. My camera stops automatically every 10 minutes, and I didn't catch the rest of the coloring on the first layer. But you can see the comparison now between the fox on the left and the fox on the right. You can see it's much more vibrant and much more nicely blended. So you can really add that second layer if you want to take your coloring to the next level. So for the 4 colors, you could reduce down to 3. Like I said, I've used those lightest 3 shades to color in foxes for a couple years now, and I do really enjoy it. But wow, what a difference that Y19 made. It just added so much richness and depth. It was definitely what I had been feeling was missing from this combo. So I more than likely will be using that E19 quite a bit from now on. I'm not going to say all the time, but certainly some of the time, and maybe most of the time, because I just prefer a lot of contrast in my coloring. That's just the way I like it to look. Once again, I went outside the lines a little bit there, so I'm just grabbing that colorless blender to clean up anything just really carefully and trying to get in there nice and gentle without kind of pulling that orange out of the lines. So once I'm done with that, I did take that YR14 and colored the centers of all of my flowers. I just wanted to have that color one more place on the card, and so the centers of the flowers was perfect for that. And then I'm going to move on to the white parts of my foxes, and I wanted to go with like a creamy shade, so I went with E40, E41, and E42. I'm starting with the E42 and just doing a little light shadowing. I don't want them to look brown and orange. I want them to look white and orange, but they are wild animals. They are out in the woods and, you know, probably not taking frequent baths. So it's okay if they look like a little bit dusty and dirty, like they've been romping around in the forest. So I'm blending out the E42 with the E41 and just taking that color a little bit further. I still want to leave some of that white cardstock, so I don't want to get carried away. And then I'll just do a touch of the E40, and that marker started leaking, so I just pulled the other cap off. That equalizes the pressure in the barrel and almost always does the trick for me. So then I'm going to take my colorless blender once again and just use that to bridge the gap between the E40 and the white cardstock, so everything is really nice and soft. I want them to look fluffy and furry, so I'm going to just add a little bit of that. And then I'm going to move on to my bunnies. So for them, I'm going to start out with some lighter brown shades. I'm going to add some darker shades in a bit to give them some details. But first I like to lay in a base coat, and I'm doing that with E50, E51, and E53. Starting with the E53 for my shadows, and laying those in on the back of the body, like I mentioned, down the back of the head, on the ears, on the hindquarters, and on the underside of the arms. I left the belly and the back foot to be white, and also the area around the eye, nose, and mouth. So I just blended all of that out, and then I'm gonna let that dry a bit and move on to my second bunny. This layer is pretty quick and easy because, like I said, it's just a base coat. I want to add some details over top, but it's just easier to have this underneath rather than having to try to blend out later on and add the lighter browns in around the darker browns, especially since I like to do a lot of like a textural detail with the bunnies often. So just having this smooth undercoat underneath, it just helps me kind of figure out where I want the darker shades to go. I'm going to deepen that up, keep the E53, but add in the E55 and E57. And then I'm going to come in and add a little bit of kind of spots and dots here and there, some dark patches on the back of the head and on the hindquarters as well, down the back. Just picking and choosing places. Sometimes I want it to be more of a stripe, and other times I want it to be more of like splotches. So I'll just do different things. And then I'll come in with the E55 and go over the edge of that E57 to help break that up a bit, but then also carry that color forward a bit as well to just add some more texture. And doing that kind of dotting motion also is going to provide some texture, just help them look a bit more fuzzy. And then I'll come in with the E53 and continue that forward as well. Just making sure that everything is softened, and this is going to help fade it into the rest of the fur tone, since that was the darkest shade that I used on the lightest parts of the body. So once I'm happy with how he's looking, I did add a little shadow under his ear there that's on his back, and a bit more darkness just to kind of make sure everything was just exactly how I wanted him to be. And then I'm going to switch over to my second bunny, and I'm going to do him a little bit different because I like to give them both different personalities. So I'm using the same exact shades, so they can definitely be litter mates or whatever, but just each their own unique bunny. So he's going to have a bit more of a heavy coat of that E57. And then I'm going to give him both of his ears to be brown. The first bunny had one brown ear and one lighter ear with the brown spot. This bunny will have two brown ears, and I'm also going to bring that color down over the bridge of his nose, just like I did with the first bunny. I did get a little bit too close to his eye with that lightest shade, but I'm going to fix that in just a minute. And I also went a little bit closer on his belly than I decided I wanted. So I'm going to blend out that with the E51 just to kind of soften it a bit more. And a little E50 as well. I also like to color the insides of the ears with a little bit of a brown shade. That way when I add the pink later on, it doesn't look too unnatural. And then I'll grab my colorless blender and kind of just push those colors back away from the eye and on the belly as well, just kind of softening that and, you know, getting it back to where I want it to be. I'll do that on the first bunny as well, and that's going to just help everything fade really nicely. For their tails, I'm going to add some warm grays. I'm using W1 and W3, and again, just doing little dots there to make it look nice and fluffy. And then I'm going to add my rosy cheeks using R000, R11, and R20. And I'll also color the insides of their ears. So I did the R20 first, just adding a little bit of that to the insides of the ears, and then doing a little oval shape on the cheekbone, and then also colored in the bunny's noses with the R20. And then I'm blending that out with the R11, tracing around the edges of the rosy cheek with that, blending out the ear with that as well, and then the R000, which is super light, so it's going to really help fade the color into the fur, especially since they're all kind of like white where the cheek is, so that just really helps it look a bit more natural and not too out of place. Not that critters blush, but they do in the card making world. So I'm moving on to my leaves, and I'm using G21, G24, and G29 for those. I decided to keep it simple and just do all of the leaves with these shades. I'm starting with the little grasses, but I'm going to do the ones on the flowers with the same combos. So I used the G29 first for the shadow. I like to put the shadow closest to the stem of the leaves, and then blend out toward the ends and put the highlight on the ends. And then for the leaves on the plants, I'm going to end up only using the darkest two shades because they're really small. So I just did a little bit of that G29 closest to the stem like I mentioned. And then I will do the G24 to fill them in. And I just did all of them at once because they're so super tiny. It's really quick and easy to do that rather than switching back and forth between the markers for each plant. So the audiobook that I was listening to while coloring this was called Violetta by Isabel Allende, and so that inspired me to do the flowers in purple. So I went with BV13 and BV17, and I am laying in the BV17 first and just going very carefully right around that orange center that I previously colored in. And I'm just going to do each one the same. I wanted these to be kind of like purple wildflowers growing in this little woodland scene that I'll be doing. And then I started to blend that out with the BV13, but the colors ended up being too similar for such a small area. So if I were coloring something that were larger, I would definitely want to keep that BV13 in there. But because they were so small, they blend really well anyway, and so I wanted there to be a little bit more of a highlight on the ends of the petals. So I switched it up to BV11, and I like that much better. So I'm just going to continue filling in all of these flowers. Like I said, I like to put the darkest at the center and the highlight on the edges, just because I feel like the flowers are thinner at the ends of the petals, and so more light seeps through. But obviously there are definitely flowers that have darker edges and lighter centers, so you could reverse it if you wanted to, and it would still look completely fabulous. I decided to do yellow butterflies since purple and yellow are complementary colors, and also the cover of the audiobook was purple and yellow. So I chose Y11, Y13, and Y15, and just like the flowers with the same reasoning behind it, I put the darkest closest to the body of the butterfly and the highlight on the outside of the wings. And I did add a touch more of the V15 in there to darken that up a bit. And then the body, I'm just going to color in solid with the E44 because it's such a small little narrow piece of a body there. And then I'm taking a black Sakura Jelly Roll pen, getting that started off to the side. And then I'll go over the eyes of my critters, the ones that have them open. Just makes them nice and bright and shiny, and then I'll trim these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm going to use the Hello Bluebird Big Mountain Scene die and cut that out of some Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock, and then I will separate all the different bits so that I can color them with some Distress Oxide inks. For the sky, I'm going to use Salvage Patina. I'm going to bring that down from the top of that section so that the sky is darker at the top and then gets a little bit hazier down where the mountain peaks will be. I just wanted it to have kind of almost like a cloudy or misty appearance down at those points. So I'm just deepening up that top edge a bit. Then I can set that off to the side, and I will also use that same shade to add a little bit of frosty glow to the bottom edge of each of the snowdrifts. Just real quick and easy there. Then I'm going to do the mountain top in purple. I'm using Shaded Lilac because this is a very pale shade of purple that almost has like a grayish undertone to me. So it feels a bit more natural than like a bright purple. And I'm going to balance that out with some pumice stone down at the bottom part of that. And I'll just work over that a few times to make sure that I've built up that color to a level where I want it. And just try to be careful not to bend any of those little bits as well. I'll go back and add a little more of that shaded lilac, and then I'm going to move on to the grasses. And I wanted this scene to be really light and bright and fresh, kind of new grass look. So I'm using Twisted Citron for the top part of each of these rolling hills. It just gives you that really nice kind of spring into summer yellow-green look that I was going for. And then I wanted to darken up the bottom part of each of those rolling hills so it gives each hill a little bit of separation once they're all stacked together. So I'm going to use Mowed Lawn for that. And I will bring that up from the bottom of each of those hills and just add a couple layers of that so that it gets nice and deeply saturated down at the bottom, and make sure that I have a nice blend between those two shades. So I'm going to do that again for all three of these hills, and if I need to, I will go back to the Twisted Citron to just smooth everything out, and then do the final one. So I have seen this dye done with snow scenes several times, but I've never seen anybody use it for a spring or summer scene. So I wanted to try to do that today. So I have die cut the frame once again, well, the whole thing, but I'm just using the frame out of some Lawn Fawn speckled eggshell cardstock. And I'm going to adhere that to a speckled eggshell card base as well. So I'm just using my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue to add the glue and then press that down into place so that it's flush with all four sides. And then I can start to fit the rest of these die cuts together like a little puzzle. So I'm going to start with the sky and add that right at the top, as I wanted to make sure that the top edge was nice and straight, so if I needed to adjust that, I could. But then I'm going to switch to building that up from the bottom. So I'm going to find the bottom grass border, and I will adhere that down first, well, second, I guess, and then I will continue up the panel. So I'm going to take the next grass panel, just making sure that that is the correct one before I adhere it down, and then I will add that. And I kept the glue toward the bottom of each of these sections because I wasn't sure if I was going to try to tuck those flowers into each of those hills, but I ended up not doing that. So I've got my third hill now, and then I have my mountain range. So I'm just going to add that, making sure to get into some of those little bits there so that's adhered down really well. And then all that's left are the snow caps. So I'm just adding the glue into that little recessed area. That seems to be the easiest way to do it. And then I'll set that snow cap in place right over top. So just making sure that those are pressed down firmly. Adding that final snow cap, and then I'm going to pop this piece into my Misty, this whole card base, so that I can stamp my sentiment. I'm doing that in VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm using Hello Sweet Friend from the Forest Friends stamp set, and I am going to stamp that down twice to make sure that it's nice and bold. Then I'm going to open up that card so I can stamp on the inside, and I decided to use Mermaid ink from Lawn Fawn because that matches the sky pretty well. So I stamped down another fox and bunny, and then a little grass image, and the other sentiment from that stamp set, which says "Better Together." So then I'm ready to add in my images and start to stage this little scene. And at first I was going to start with the flowers, but I changed my mind and decided to start at the top of the hill with this cute little bunny. I wanted him to be kind of coming down from the mountains to greet his little friend. So then I'm going to take one of those little flower images and add that over on the right hand side because I wasn't sure if the fox's tail would go in front of it or not. So I wanted to add the flowers first, and I added one of those little grasses in front of that. Then I'll take that little play bowing fox and add that on the next hill right underneath the sentiment. So his tail almost acts as an arrow pointing you up to the word friend, drawing your eye toward that sentiment. Then I'll take another cluster of flowers and kind of add that between the next two rolling hills. I'm kind of working in a zigzag pattern here, and I'll add another little grass cluster in front of that as well to kind of hide that stem. And then I'm going to take the next fox, and that's going to be sitting in front of the flowers on the bottom hill. And then next to him, I'm going to have the bunny on the opposite side. So it kind of goes back and forth between the critters too. So I have bunny, fox, fox, bunny, which also spreads the color around the scene a bit more as well. The last flower cluster was going to hang off into the frame, so I just trimmed off the stem a little bit, put that between the fox and bunny at the bottom, and then I have another little grass cluster to go in front of that. And then I had one more little, like a 2-leaf cluster that I'm going to tuck behind those flowers just to give them a little bit of a different look from the other ones. Then I just have those 2 butterflies, and I wanted to use this one to cover up. I had a tiny little smudge right next to that center snow-capped mountain on the sky, so I just put the butterfly right over that, and then the other butterfly right in the center above those purple flowers. And I just felt like the top of the card was missing something, so I took the word hugs from the Big Woodland Hugs stamp set, and I stamped that using some Dusty Conquer Distress Oxide ink because I didn't have the right color purple dye ink, so this was actually quite perfect because it went really well with the BV shades that I had used for those woodland violets. So I just glued that down right above the sentiment. So it says, hugs, hello, sweet friend. So it was definitely an afterthought, but I think it was just the right thing to finish off this card. Aside from a little touch of glitter. So I added some Stardust stickles to my butterfly's wings and also to the centers of each of my little woodland violets. And I almost added it to the snow-capped mountains, but decided it might be too distracting from those sweet critters, and I really wanted them to draw the attention. So that is the finished card. I'm going to tip that so you can see all of the detail and a little bit of that sparkle and shine, and give you another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment. Chatting with you guys afterward is one of my favorite parts. I just love to hear what you think. I'll have links to all of the products I used in the description bar below, so you can check them out there if you're interested in picking up anything for yourself. And here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. If you want to keep watching, you can click on either one to check them out. Thank you guys so much. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.